And at number 10, Aquaman. DC's King of Atlantis first debuted in More Fun Comics issue 73 in November of 1941 as a backup feature. The character soon caught on, but then in the Bronze Age we will be presented with a tarnishing take on him, his wholesome weak portrayal in the Hanna-Barbera cartoon Super Friends, which featured other members of the Justice League, notoriously made the character into a joke, one that has lasted for years, and has even been addressed by Aquaman himself in newer volumes of his comic, like the Jeff Johns New 52 run. But luckily that may all change thanks to his silver screen adaptation played by Jason Momoa, even to the point that there's even speculation that his solo film may be exactly what the DCEU needs in order to retain some semblance of cinematic integrity. Speaking of Kings of Atlantis, our next number is the Marvel equivalent, but has a very different story. In at number 9, Namor the Submariner. Namor is considered the first anti-hero. Hailing from the Golden Age, Namor the Submariner began his days in comics as a character published by Timely, who would later become Marvel. He served as an antagonist of the United States, with comic historian Les Daniels calling him a freak in the service of chaos. Always motivated by serving justice, he went about things in a destructive way, destroying the likes of ships and skyscrapers in order to get what he wanted. In the early days, he often fought against the original android version of the Human Torch. This all changed when World War II came around, and American comics, despite not being involved in the war at the time, began incorporating the war into their stories, having their heroes fight off Nazi and Axis powers. Post-war, as the Golden Age was coming to an end, Namor's title would be cancelled, but he would resurface in the Silver Age alongside the Fantastic Four, and would continue to be a valuable presence in the Marvel Universe then on out, even becoming a member of the Illuminati and playing a major role in certain story arc events, which unfortunately have not been included in their MCU adaptations. Up next, number 8, Lockjaw. Often animal superheroes lack credibility in the superhero world as far as some audiences are concerned, and we largely have to thank the Silver Age and Frederick Wortham for that. Many superhero animals were introduced back then to help round out superheroes and make them more family friendly. That being said, you've got to give Marvel credit. Their superpowered furry creations tend to hold some merit, like everybody's favorite bulldog, Lockjaw. Lockjaw is an inhuman dog with the power of teleportation and precognition, and is capable of swallowing inorganic material with no ill effect. He serves the Inhuman royal family as an escort and protector, and even appeared in the MCU in the Inhumans television series. So what makes him so awesome? Let's list off some of his achievements. Killed Black Order member Supergiant in the comics. He can sense danger from far off, like when Dr. Doom had manipulated Silver Surfer's powers. He led the Pet Avengers, which exists, which is pretty cool. Alongside Black Bolt, Medusa, and other Inhumans, he helped take down Sentry. He's helped many a hero when it came to needing to get them somewhere speedy and vital with his transportation abilities. And he's also a dog. Evidence enough that he's great. Moving on. Up next at 7, Stardust the Super Wizard. Diving further into the obscure, let's talk a little bit about this hero created by Fletcher Hanks in 1939, who unfortunately sometimes suffered from tiny head big body syndrome. Not a real syndrome, FYI. I'm just being a dick. So you may be wondering why put a completely ridiculous superhero on the list of best superheroes. Well, I'm an advocate of celebrating comic book history. It's what shaped the characters and the medium into what we know and love now. So looking back at the form, context, and ideologies behind the works like our pal Stardust here is important. Stardust had a lot of potential too. He was an alien creature who had a vast knowledge of interplanetary science, making him, I quote, the most remarkable man that ever lived. He also apparently decapitated criminals, so there's that. He would monitor crime across the galaxy from his base on a private star. Plus, he was also a little unhinged. His brand of justice involved the likes of turning criminals into worms and feeding them to giant vultures from Venus, and also drowning people in tidal waves, using a disintegrating ray to dispose of their bodies. It's not illegal if there's no evidence left behind, right? Staying on that obscure train, next up is number 6, Jill Trent Science Sleuth. Jill was more of a mild hero compared to Stardust, meaning she didn't outright murder criminals. She was an adventurer published by NAMOR Comics in 1942 and solved crimes with her detective skills and scientific ingenuity. She also knew her way around a fight, and packed a punch, and occasionally wielded firearms. Jill also had an arsenal of inventions that she would use in her stories, like infrared glasses that gave her x-ray vision, electro-repellent that could manipulate metal objects, and indestructible cloth. Plus, on top of all of that awesomeness, she could have arguably been the first queer superhero. The character frequently shared a bed with her best friend and partner in justice, Daisy Smith, who she also shared a quarter interest in a uranite mine from Jill's uncle. You don't share money like that with everybody. Many read this as a subtle way of depicting that the two were in a relationship. Up next, number 5, The Flash, Barry Allen. We've managed to get through 3 parts of this list without mentioning a single character who's donned the Flash mantle. While my personal favorite is the Golden Age incarnation Jay Garrick, we're going to look at Barry Allen today, the Flash who really made an impact in the Silver Age, setting up most of the legacy and powers that the character and his predecessors now proudly boast. Barry Allen is the second Flash, who made his debut in Showcase number 4 in October 1956. His Flash was also the introduction of the Speed Force, an upgrade to the original Flash's capabilities. In addition to that, Barry and his predecessor were responsible for the creation of the DC multiverse, sort of. In the Flash number 123, a story called Flash of Two Worlds was released, with a cover created by Carmen Infantino that featured both Flashes, Jay Garrick and Barry Allen. As the story goes, Infantino was notorious for drawing up covers that editor Julius Schwartz would need to come up with stories for, and rather than stumping the editor, it led to Schwartz coming up with the idea that there were parallel universes in comics. Considering how much of an impact that's had on mainstream comics in general, it's kind of a big deal. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Barry has been a crucial part to how the DC universe has been shaped as a whole due to his powers and the consequences of using the Speed Force in an extreme way. Plus, the DCEU version of the character on the CW's The Flash is more than lovable. Up next, number 4, Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones is an undeniable powerhouse. Whether you're a fan of the character's comic book persona or the Jessica of Netflix Marvel fame portrayed by Kristen Ritter, it's easy to find her compelling. But for the sake of this list, we're taking a closer look at her MCU version, and how it's really changed the game when it comes to portraying female superheroes in mainstream media. Because let's be honest, prior to Jessica Jones, the amount of female superpowered individuals on our screens, big and small, was pretty lackluster. Also in terms of quality. Jessica's story in the series was not only one of a badass tortured character coming to terms with her trauma and bringing it to justice, but also of a relatable anti-hero living in a world where the larger scale MCU has complex trickle-down effects. It's a prime example of how creatively intertwined storytelling can really work well. Jessica is a character who doesn't want to be a hero, but finds herself pigeonholed into that role, and she's definitely got her flaws, all of which make her more likable to binge watch. Up next, number 3, Squirrel Girl. If you're familiar with Squirrel Girl, you know the character is capable of some pretty outstanding feats. Her ability to control squirrels may seem absurd at first, but considering it's allowed her to take down the likes of Thanos and Galactus in rather unconventional but very effective ways, she's become a character that is no longer dismissed. She also has previously had a relationship with Wolverine, and that in itself is no easy feat it seems. Squirrel Girl, aka Dorian Green, has been making a splash in recent years, quickly becoming one of the most underrated heroes in Marvel's roster. Created by Will Murray and Steve Ditko in 1991, the character came to be out of a desire of Murray's to write a lighthearted superhero story, rather than some of the more heavier dramatic arcs that had become the norm in mainstream comics in the 90s. Since then, she's fit into many roles: a nanny for Jessica Jones and Luke Cage's daughter, a student at Empire State University studying computer science, a member of the Great Lake Avengers, a solo crime-fighting career, and even a member of the Avengers 2. Up next in our number 2 spot, Shazam. Shazam has a long and fascinating history as a character that stems back to the Golden Age, first appearing in 1939. Originally operating under the alias of Captain Marvel, his origin story tells of a young orphan boy who is lured into an empty subway station by a man in a trench coat. Yeah. Then he meets a wizard and is given the powers of a bunch of gods, whose names all equal the acronym Shazam. When Billy said the word Shazam out loud, he would become a fully grown man and have all of his powers, which were very Superman-esque. Hence the first lawsuit to publisher Fawcett Comics from DC. Eventually DC bought the rights to the character in 1972, long after Fawcett had started to die out. That's when his name was officially changed, and he continued to adopt a more goofier, goody two-shoes persona. Despite that, there's a lot of promise for Shazam these days, and hope that his upcoming feature adaptation will return the character to his glory days and will allow for him to retain a sense of fun, reaching out and appealing to a wider audience. At his core, Shazam is a character with the ability to empower kids. Billy can do anything when he becomes Shazam, and that has a lot of thematic potential that could really leave an impact on the DCEU. And finally, in at number 1, Jean Grey. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant, and one of the most compelling characters in the X-Men roster, let alone in the Marvel Universe. Despite her sometimes weird ups and downs with her main love interest Cyclops, who most either love or hate, the character has withstood the test of time since her first appearance in 1963's The X-Men #1. Created by legends Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, she was endowed with an immense amount of power, has been both evil and good, and is consistently a force to be reckoned with, on and off the battlefield. Jean Grey has the gift of incredibly powerful telepathy and telekinesis. As Phoenix, her powers were upped even more, giving her immense cosmic abilities including the likes of cosmic fire generation, reality warping, temporal and existence manipulation, life force control, and space and time control. The Dark Phoenix saga, led by Chris Claremont and John Byrne, remains one of the most epic story arcs in the Marvel Universe to this day, and paved the way for more complex and conflicted portrayals of the character, like the Jean and Grant Morrison's 2004 New X-Men. It's also worth noting that she has died and come back to life more times than most superheroes, which, yes, is common, but hey, considering that Jean is always in high demand, I guess that's not too bad.
In the number 10 spot is Beast Boy. We open up this list with one of the beloved DC Teen Titans because who can resist that healthy green face, and who can forget just how awesome his powers are. Beast Boy's got the ability to transform into any animal he wants, something I used to dream of doing as a kid, but no amount of running around on my legs and arms like a wolf would work for some reason. I'm obviously missing the key ingredient, West African monkey serum, which is a unique and fun backstory that this guy has. Like, come on, I would pay big bucks for that ability if I had big bucks. Next at number 9 we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mirage Studios brought us the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 1984, and I wasn't around back then, but if I was, I would definitely say, who knew the world needed pizza-loving anthropomorphic turtles so badly? I couldn't pick one because their mix of personalities are what I love so much about them. You got the smarts, the humor, the seriousness, and the anger. It's like spending an afternoon babysitting a preteen girl, but with more fun weapons. Well, depending on the girl, I guess. In the number 8 spot is GOLDBALLS. I told you it was gonna be a fun ride. I can't even play this off, you guys definitely know I chose this guy for the name of absolute gold, quite literally. Whenever I have to read something or do something in regards to GOLDBALLS, I instantly light up. Yes, maybe some will shun a man whose ability is to throw his balls at his opponents. In fact, I hope most do. But I applaud Marvel for being so ballsy with this one. He's obviously given me a lot of material to work with. Up at number 7 we got COMET the SUPERHORSE. If you guys know me at all, you know that I 100% needed a horse on this list. COMET was first introduced to the DC world back in 1962, and after 1985 he was changed completely, losing everything that made him awesome. But prior to that, he was Supergirl's steed, and we are going to ignore the fact that he was also her boyfriend for a while too, in his human form, which I refuse to acknowledge. He is the immortal and superpowered horse of every girl's dream, and I even rode a gray horse named Comet back in the day, so yeah, I'm basically Supergirl. All the evidence points to it. Coming in at number 6 is Matter Eater Lad. Some call him lame, I call him amazing. I mean, the guy saved the world by eating the miracle machine. I mean, yeah, it drove him a little cuckoo for a while, but what more do you want? Oh, and in case you missed it, this guy's superpower is eating, which I would also consider my superpower if not for the fact that walls taste disgusting. Don't ask me how I know that. I think DC took a chance on this guy, and it could have paid off if he didn't get swallowed up, excuse the pun, in a world where being super strong or super fast or any other boring powers qualified you as a superhero only. Come on guys, let the man eat his way into your hearts. Next up at number 5 is Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn has made a name for herself as one of the most profitable names of DC thanks to Suicide Squad, a movie we can probably all agree would have been better if it just starred Harley and not loads of other forgettable faces. But long before her time on the big screen, Harley was a complex and unpredictable character who was caught in a very abusive and confusing relationship. She's not only there to give us something to laugh at, she shows us that even the zaniest of characters can grow and overcome adversity, hence why she is on the hero list. Up next to number 4 is Raven. When people ask me who I would most likely cosplay as if I was any bit creative and not likely to murder myself with a sewing needle, it's this DC lady. She is so intriguing, not just because I totally understand the struggle of trying to contain myself so as not to kill anyone, but also because she's this mysterious figure with exponential powers that we haven't even seen yet. She's constantly at odds with the darker side of her soul, and yet she rises above it to do good for the world. Most times. Crashing the whole Starfire Robin wedding maybe wasn't her best moment. In the number 3 spot we have Spider-Man. Marvel's little Peter Parker holds a special place in my heart because Spider-Man in 2002 was basically my first real superhero movie, and I fell in love with it. Still cry about everyone losing their dad figures, of course. There is something about a dorky kid turned superhero overnight that is extremely endearing, and maybe we can't relate to the exact experience, but we can relate to feeling like the odd one out and having secrets that eat us up inside. As long as we gloss over the whole Spider-Man Rain Killer Sperm episode. Yep. Coming in at number 2 is the Hulk. Whenever people ask me who my favorite superhero is, the answer is actually pretty tough to pick out, but the Incredible Hulk always comes to mind. I am a sucker for a tortured soul and a complex psyche, and his backstory just gets me in all kinds of ways. His father was horribly abusive, and this led to his intermittent explosive disorder manifesting in the way that it did after a run-in with a gamma bomb. And at the end of the day, he Hulk smashes and gets stuff done. That being said, not a huge fan of Mark Ruffalo. Throw in a nerdy Chris Pratt and I am listening. And finally, in the number 1 spot we got GENIE. This is This is it, boys and girls, my role model of a superhero. She is an X-Force member, and her powers are seismic waves that get stronger the more alcohol she consumes. GENIE is Marvel's representation of who I strive to be after a couple glasses of wine. Don't tell your parents that. Except I can't do gin, the stuff is disgusting. I'd probably be more of like a Malibu mage or something. She didn't last long alive in comics, but she lives forever in my heart.
In at number 10, Bucky Barnes. Bucky Barnes is a versatile character. He is adapted to the times and keeps coming back as a fan favorite. Initially an army brat, the character was an orphan at the army training camp that his father was accidentally killed at during training. That's where he met Steve Rogers. And once he learned that Rogers was Captain America, a hero he idolized, he soon became his sidekick. The one and only Marvel sidekick ever, sort of. Bucky would go on all sorts of missions fighting off evil Axis powers, but towards the end of the war in 1945 he died in a tragic accident. This all happened during a skirmish where Bucky was trying to defuse a bomb on an airplane. The bomb accidentally detonated, and Cap and the US Army assumed that he died in the explosion. For years the character was absent from the comics, and acted as an intriguing backstory in the later adventures Cap would have. But that wasn't the end of Bucky. In 2005 he would reappear as the Winter Soldier, giving Captain America one hell of a challenge on the battlefield, and quite the psychological mind f***. He was essentially a villain, but later his memory would be restored and all would be well. Bucky and Cap is possibly the most profound superhero sidekick relationship, alongside that of Jason Todd and Batman's, and arguably Dick Grayson, but like there's no tragedy there. Cap lost Bucky, got him back in a completely nefarious way, and eventually had to help him rehabilitate back into the Bucky he once knew and loved. Now that's a character with resilience. In at number 9, Batgirl. Speaking of resilient characters, Barbara Gordon aka Batgirl aka Oracle is one of the members of the Bat family, and the daughter of Gotham PD Commissioner James Gordon. Barbara has got a lot going on as a character, a complicated family backstory, a traumatic life event that drastically changed the way she was written, which also completely depowered her, then came back representing a whole new demographic of readers, and eventually had an inspiring return to the Batsuit. While Batgirl initially appeared as the sidekick for Batwoman back in the day, DC editor Julia Schwartz decided that the character needed a revamp since she was pretty outdated. They figured the best way of doing this, and a way to bring in new female audiences, was to introduce a new character on the Batman television series. Yes, that campy 60s Adam West show. Except this time, Batgirl would be the daughter of Commissioner Gordon. In her civilian life, she had a PhD in library science, and was the head of the Gotham City Public Library. Then in 1988, in Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, the hero was retired when she was shot by the Joker, and paralyzed from the waist down. It's also implied that she was sexually abused in the attack. Luckily, that wasn't the last of Barbara. She was given some agency back a year later, when Kim Yale and John Ostrander developed her new persona, Oracle, a character who dug herself out of depression to use her training in aptitude in information sciences to help fight crime, and also aid Batman. Then on Gail Simone's run for the New 52 Batgirl, we saw her take that to the next step, literally, by gaining her ability to walk again via the combination of special treatment and a whole lot of willpower. Up next, number 8, Rorschach. Alan Moore's Watchmen is perhaps the most celebrated collection of comics. I mean, hey, there are a few other great ones that it rubs shoulders with, but it's undeniable that Watchmen's subverted perspective on superheroes in an alternate 1980s vastly changed the way that audiences read comics. It presented a much darker, satirical, and disillusioned way of exploring the genre, tied in with reality-based what-ifs that really forced readers to question, analyze, and deconstruct superheroes in general. Rorschach, the prime vigilante whose goal is to deliver swift, eye-for-an-eye justice, is completely unhinged, and extremely invested in his unwavering code of ethics. Plus his mask is pretty dope. Rorschach is a refreshing look at the vigilante superhero, a character that draws similarities to Batman, but is willing to do whatever it takes to fairly avenge those who have been wronged. In at number 7, Scott Pilgrim. The first character on our list who doesn't fit into the traditional mold of a superhero, Scott Pilgrim is an anti-hero for the millennial masses. He's a regular lazy slacker who lives in a crappy apartment and is dating all the wrong people, all in order to get over the woman who broke his heart, who is now a wildly successful chart-topping musician. But all that changes when he meets Ramona Flowers, sort of. And in order to win her heart, he's gotta fight her 7 evil exes in video game-inspired brawls. Scott makes this list for being hilarious, relatable, and by subverting what we normally consider to be a superhero comic, leaving us with a story that's not only massively entertaining, but one that's filled with nostalgia and coming-of-age life lessons, all of which resonate on many levels. It's also Toronto porn, and that's pretty swell. In at number 6, Black Panther. The popularity of his recent feature film makes this character a dead giveaway on this list. Black Panther, aka T'Challa, comes from Wakanda, an advanced African civilization that was never exposed to colonialism, and thrived after finding deposits of vibranium in their territory. They're the most technological, superior, and intelligent society on Earth, and as many film critics have been quick to note, the film is revolutionary. As Time magazine put it, it's more than just a superhero film. It's a film about what it means to be black in both America and Africa, a film about the duality of blackness, and a film that grapples head-on with the issues affecting modern-day black life. Which, hey, it's about damn time. Plus, Black Panther as a character is just flat-out awesome to boot. Combining his own exceptional combat skills, enhanced strength, speed, agility, and durability, his expertise in science, his high-tech vibranium equipment, and his mystical precognition to make him one hell of a hero and worthy adversary. Plus that costume. In at number 5, Buffy Summers. Buffy is the second person on our list who isn't a superhero in the traditional sense, but she sure does have all the makings and traits of one. From the television series Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Buffy is a young woman who we start off with in high school who is a Slayer. A Slayer being a woman chosen by fate to battle evil forces, who is endowed with super strength, endurance, agility, accelerated healing, intuition, and a limited degree of clairvoyance. She slays vampires and other supernatural creatures, all of which threaten to destroy the world as we know it, and to bring hell on Earth. Definitely not a thing anybody wants. But the thing that really drove home for a lot of fans was how Buffy, and the show itself, was one of the first really popular mainstream depictions of a badass female superhero who wasn't flying around in tights. Her stories were relatable, and at its core it was all about how she just wanted to be normal but must embrace her destiny. Buffy herself was a subversion of the stereotypical female horror film victim, with her character physically looking like many characters who fall into that archetype, except she had agency, she had power, and she kicked some serious butt. Up next, number 4, Batwoman. Batwoman was a Golden Age character who first appeared in Detective Comics number 233 in 1956. Initially called Kathy Kane, she was created as a member of the Bat family, one of the characters that were included after Frederick Wortham's Seduction of the Innocent book led to the creation of the Comics Code Authority. Batwoman was supposed to help balance out Batman and Robin by adding a feminine, familial touch to the character's world, especially since Wortham had criticized the dynamic duo as being homosexual. This meant that Batwoman was supposed to add some romance to the mix, and fought crime using a utility belt that included girl gadgets that were secretly weapons, like lipstick, compact mirrors, and charm bracelets. Fun. The irony though is that years later in 2006, when the character was revamped and became Kate Kane, she was a lesbian. Despite not being the first LGBTQ character at DC Comics at that time, she was the one who got the most hype and press coverage. When 2010 rolled around, she got her own series, and writers J.H. Williams III and W. Hayden Blackman expanded Kate's supporting cast. Plus, they created some of the most fantastical, dark, and beautifully crafted stories post-Crisis and in the New 52, really exploring the boundaries of the comic form and doing innovative work for a mainstream DC title. In at 3, Dr. Manhattan. To be perfectly honest, Dr. Manhattan is probably my all-time favorite superhero. The only reason why he doesn't make the top spot on this list is because of how important I feel the two numbers coming up are to the world of comics and pop culture as a whole. That being said, Dr. Manhattan is a parallel in ways to our number 8 spot, Rorschach. He's on the completely other end of the scale. Being unaffected by human life, he's an all-powerful, omnipotent being, and this has caused him to lose his empathy, at least until the final events of the comic. Spoilers, sort of. In which witnessing a miracle reinstates a semblance of adoration in life. What makes him even more interesting is the political repercussions a character like Manhattan has raised. There's literally whole books devoted to theories behind the texts and ideologies it's inspired. While Manhattan is literally a character that can do anything and everything, and can only be diffused by a convoluted plot like that of the conscientious megalomaniac Adrian Veidt, it takes some master character crafting like Alan Moore's to make him so intriguing and complex in order to resonate with so many readers. And that in itself is one hell of a feat. In our number 2 spot, Wonder Woman. Perhaps the most transformative character on this list, Wonder Woman is a figure that started off with some shadier origins back when she was created in 1941 by William Moulton Marston, the psychologist who had invented the polygraph. Marston wanted to create a female superhero who was the image of that era's unconventional liberated woman. Much of her character was inspired by Olive Bryne, the woman who lived with Marston and his wife in a polyamorous relationship. Aspects of bondage and submission were also incorporated into the character. For example, she was bound to Aphrodite's law, which meant that when her bracelets of submission were chained together by a man, he could take away her Amazonian super strength. So much for being liberated, eh? That being said, Wonder Woman would go through decades of changes, from being weirdly depowered in the 70s to now becoming one of the most empowering female characters in mainstream pop culture. Wonder Woman has proven to have staying power. The recent 2017 film speaks volumes to that. A whole new generation of Wonder Woman fans have rallied around the ideals of feminism and female strength that she represents. And hey, you gotta admit, it's pretty awesome seeing a bunch of young girls running around in Wonder Woman gear unabashedly declaring that they too can do anything they want. And finally, in at number 1, Superman. I'll be perfectly honest, I'm really not a big Superman fan. This is partially due to the stunts that DC has pulled over the years with the character, including my all-time favorite 1992 classic story arc, The Death of Superman. Sorry, by classic I mean steaming pile of narrative garbage that forever changed the state of death in comics. But that's the thing with Superman, he is a character who has changed the face of comics for decades, and will continue to do so. He's the character that comes to mind immediately when you think of the word superhero. He was the defining archetype of the superhero, and the reason why the genre exists in the first place, with his debut in 1938 changing the game forever. Yes, the Man of Steel had predecessors in comics, but he was really the first character who struck a note with audiences. In addition to that, he's proven to be resilient too, beyond just bad writing. His popularity dropped significantly after World War II, after certain atrocities committed by Nazi Germany came to light on an international scale. Back then, people just couldn't bring themselves to believe in the optimistic ideals that he represented. Yet he was a rallying point of patriotism, a symbol of freedom. Superman has exceeded just being a character in the panels of comic book pages. He stands for so much more than that. He represents the ideals that people have projected onto him over the years. So whether you love him, hate him, or don't really care, it's undeniable that the Man of Steel represents more than just a hunky-dory character in tights. He's an icon, and it's well deserved.
Number 10. Wolverine. As a Canadian and an X-Men fan, and a fan of cynical jerks, it's no surprise that I think Wolverine is awesome. His regeneration is really cool, his claws lead to some wicked and brutal fights, and I just love his attitude. I'm not sure if we can show it, but that scene in X-Men First Class when he's approached by Charles and Eric is just gold. Let's find out if I can show it.
Excuse me, I'm Eric Lensher.
Charles Xavier.
Go f yourself.
Oh yeah, that's my Wolverine. He's awesome, and did I mention he's Canadian? Number 9. Dick Grayson. Oh my god. Look at his butt. Dick Grayson is just awesome. Personally, my favorite incarnation of him is Nightwing, but even as Robin, he was quite good. With Dick, I just love that we've gotten to see his development from a campy little sidekick to a butt-kicking superhero who's arguably cooler than Batman himself. Don't kill me. When I was a kid, it gave me a sense that I could grow up to be whoever I wanted. And sadly, I didn't quite grow up to be much like Nightwing, but I definitely changed a lot since I was a kid. I also really respect that he doesn't take himself too seriously and likes to joke around, but does it in moderation. What I'm saying, guys, is this. I love Dick. Number 8. Spider-Man. Specifically, Peter Parker. This isn't exactly an original choice, but it's gotta be here. As a guy who tends to enjoy lighthearted superheroes, Spidey has always been a winner for me. Cool powers, fun personality, an awesome, albeit kinda weird rogues gallery. Not to mention, some pretty great movies. It's hard not to like him. Also, this is me being Spider-Man at a kid's party. Good times. Number 7. Batman. I mean, yeah, call me a fanboy if you want, but I feel like Batman is almost a necessity on lists of favorite superheroes. He was so damn influential, and he's been around for so long with so many different interpretations, you're guaranteed at least one that you really like. Except the nipple one. You're not allowed to like the nipple one. Personally, I just love how cynical and gruff he is most of the time, even if he does go a bit too far with it at times. And there's something so cool about a normal, albeit obscenely rich guy who puts his life on the line to do what's right. That said, there will always be a place in my heart for the campy Adam West version. It's just so great. Number 6. Reed Richards. I still really like Reed Richards, but I particularly loved him as a kid. For one, it was fun sneaking downstairs to watch the Fantastic Four cartoon in the morning without my parents hearing. The theme song still sends me right back. But personally, I loved Reed because he was so smart. And as a kid, I was a classic nerd, like basically a male Lisa Simpson, except I played piano instead of the sax. And needless to say, young know-it-all Ron wasn't the most popular. I always thought it was so cool that Reed's smarts were seen as a good thing and not something to make fun of. Although, to be fair, I probably would have gotten teased a lot less if I had superpowers. Number 5. GWENPOOL. GWENPOOL is the newest hero on this list, and I'll probably get a bit of hate for having her in my top 10. She isn't super popular, people think she's annoying, I guess. But screw that, I think she's great. I was totally heartbroken to hear they were discontinuing her series. I was really enjoying the development of her powers and story, and I definitely thought she had potential to be something really special. I really hope they bring her back, partially because I friggin' love the interpretation of Baltrock the Leaper. He went from one of my least favorite villains to one of my absolute favorites in a short number of issues. Read her comics if you haven't. They're great, don't listen to the haters. Number 4. Beast. Beast is another one that I loved as a kid and still really like. Similar to the Reed Richards thing, little nerdy Ron thought he was so cool that this big blue tank of a guy would prefer to use his brains over his brawn. To this day, I find Hank McCoy to be one of the most compelling superheroes out there, although I hope they age him up in the movies soon. Nicholas Hoult is great and his eyes are beautiful, but I miss Kelsey Grammer. Not huge on his politics, but I love his acting. Number 3. Iron Man. Unlike most other members of this list, I actually fell in love with Iron Man when the movies came out. He was good in the comics, he was totally cool, but something about Robert Downey Jr.'s take on the character just made him way better. The sarcasm, the confidence, the sarcasm, the vulnerability, the sarcasm, he's great. It helps that Iron Man was one of the best superhero films ever made, but that was largely due to the awesomeness that was Tony Stark. Number 2. the Doctor. Some people might have an issue with this entry, but if you think about it, the Doctor has pretty much all the qualities of a superhero. He's smart, he's cool, he wears weird costumes, he avoids killing at all costs, he looks different over the years, and most of all, he keeps dying and coming back. I discovered the Doctor when I found a few DVDs at the library when I was a kid, and I've been in love ever since. And if you're wondering about my favorite, check out my list on the top 10 Doctors. Although I should say that after finishing Capaldi's run, I'd probably put him at number 2. I really like Capaldi. Come at me. Number 1. Deadpool. Whoa, what? Ron likes Deadpool? Next you'll be telling me Deadpool likes chimichangas. I'm so surprised. Yeah, by now I think everyone knows that I love Deadpool a lot. I love the fourth wall breaking, I love his powers, I love that his comedy is right up my alley, and I just like that his comics don't take themselves too seriously. I'm a super cynical guy, and sometimes comic books are a bit campy for me. I love that Deadpool often says exactly what I was thinking. Also, Ryan Reynolds is my boyfriend, but that's another story.
Number 10. The Daredevil. Daredevil often gets overlooked when it comes to having cool villains, because many of his villains are associated with other heroes as well, or they have been depicted as such in other adaptations. But Daredevil has deep ties to Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, and has had some devastating battles with him. He also has had extensive dealings with the Purple Man, who in the modern era is much more known for his abuse of Jessica Jones, but in comics she was just a distraction and ultimately a pawn in his battle against the Daredevil. Daredevil also crosses paths with the insane assassin Bullseye, who is so skilled he can kill a man with a roll of toilet paper. And of course there is his moral battle with his sometimes ally, sometimes enemy, the Punisher, his creation of the villainous Typhoid Mary, his love with the anti-hero Elektra, his battle against the villainous association, the Hand. All in all, it's a wonder Matt Murdock finds the time to be a lawyer and a vigilante, let alone take down all these villains. It's a lot of a lot. Number 9. Thor. The Asgardian may not be a character who leaps to the forefront of all fans' minds when it comes to villains, but he has a unique villain group centralized around him and mythology. This gives him a strong position to operate from, interestingly independently as well as connected to the large Marvel universe. Thor of course has the dastardly Loki, his brother, to contend with, but he must also deal with other mythological gods and beasts like the Midgard Serpent, or somebody like Loki's daughter Hela, people like the Enchantress who is also in love with him. With Thor you also get to up the power scale of his villains because he is a god, so that means he can be battling the Absorbing Man one day and the Celestials the next. Thor is a bit lower cause some may not gel with his villains if they are not as into mythology, but that doesn't mean that they still aren't a strong catalog, unique to the God of Thunder. Number 8. Green Lantern. We're gonna start this off with the Silver Age Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, who funnily enough would garner a reputation for being boring, despite essentially being a space cop, which should be ripe for all kinds of adventures. Some of Hal's villains would grow cooler over time, like Sinestro. Sinestro gained a whole bunch more cred upon rebirth. More than he had at the start anyway, he always had the bones though. And when the reins were passed, Green Lantern wise that is, to Kyle, John Guy and more, this only grew. Hal would start off with villains like Hector Hammond, a psychic who would grow jealous of him and also have a giant bulbous head. Star Sapphire, his on-again off-again girlfriend who would try to kill him initially when she transformed. But where Hal would really come to shine was with Rebirth, his rebirth, not the comic arc with DC. With this rebirth would come new Lantern Corps, the Red Lanterns of Rage, the Black Lanterns of Death, and the disgusting new Black Hand revamp. Even Parallax would go from being Hal to being an entity possessing him. Plus of course the foes that all the Lanterns would face in space, and for a time even the Guardians themselves. Number 7. The Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four are Marvel's first family, and as a result actually ushered in some of the biggest threats in the Marvel universe that they have ever known. Some have become so well established that some forget that they were ever originally fighting the Fantastic Four. Of course most remember their connection with Doom, the bitter rivalry between Reed and Victor, which will never not be glorious. But the Fantastic Four are also the first to encounter and defeat Galactus, discover the war between the Skrulls and the Kree, reintroduce Namor to modern continuity after he had languished in the gap between the Gold and Silver Ages. Don't laugh, but also people like Mole Man and Paste Pot Pete. They had their day. Some of these villains have faded because the star of the Fantastic Four has faded, but hopefully Marvel's first family will rise again. Number 6. Spawn. Spawn first debuted in Spawn #1 back in 1992, a creation of famed Spider-Man artist Todd McFarlane. Spawn managed to establish himself as a gritty anti-hero with a host of intriguing villains, all with either disturbing twisted motivations or dark looks. The demented clown, the Violator, Malaboglia, who I can never say, Malabolgia, the Master of Hell, Mammon, another Lord of Hell. If you love demonic presences, Spawn is definitely a series to check out. It recently, at the time of this recording, crossed its 300th issue. Spawn would also, well, spawn spin-off characters, hunting him down, such as Angela. There are a whole host of indie comics with their own universes that can sometimes get buried, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth checking out. Number 5. X-Men. The X-Men also have placed the Marvel Universe in peril with their wide array of villains. The X-Men give the world Magneto, the Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver, who would later transition over to being heroes. The terrifying Immortal Apocalypse, the diabolical Mr. Sinister, the Hellfire Club, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, later just the Brotherhood of Mutants. And that is to say nothing of the humans who hate them as well, such as William Stryker and Bolivar Trask. The X-Men occupy a unique position in the Marvel Universe, which at times would even pit them against other Marvel heroes. The X-Men's villains have become part of a fabric of the world much like the Fantastic Fours, though their villainy tends to be a bit more targeted. Number 4. Wolverine. Now some of you may be saying, Wolverine is on the X-Men. Yes, he is. But he also is one of the most popular. In fact, one of, if not the only member who can consistently have a solo series without it being cancelled. Wolverine also has a whole host of people who hate just him, specifically, but will be happy to also fight the X-Men and other people, I guess, if they're there. Wolverine has to contend with former peers and rivals from the Weapon X program, such as Sabretooth and Omega Red, past ladyloves such as Lady Deathstrike, people from his past in Japan like the Silver Samurai. Wolverine is long-lived and as a result has racked up many enemies, even some of his own children, such as some with names that no one can pronounce. People yell at you if you try. These extra foes give Wolverine a little something extra in the villain department. Number 3. The Flash. The Flash may be the fastest man alive, but he also has one of the most recognizable rogues galleries even spanning back to the Golden Age. I see you, the shade. The Flash has an interesting group of rogues in that they often work together, and not all of them hate the Flash, and a lot of them actually have a mantra against killing. In fact, the Flash and them actually talk sometimes. They threw him a party once, it was sweet. Barry was just that friendly, and Wally was to an extent as well. So let's meet some of these rogues. Captain Cold, Mirror Master, Heat Wave, Weather Wizard, Gorilla Grodd, the Thinker, the list goes on. And then of course the people who really hate him. I mean, Grodd kinda hates him. But the infamous Reverse Flash. The Flash's villains are iconic and have only become more so as they have made their way into popular culture in a big way. They definitely helped elevate the Flash, who in the Silver Age when he was Barry also was accused of being boring through the Bronze Age until he died. While some may disagree, this was a complaint from the time. Wally, conversely, was very well received, especially in the 90s, which is why it made total sense that they just took the role away from him and gave it back to Barry, because classic Flash. And then they used all the villain development that had occurred for Barry and used Wally's plots to beef up the CW show, pretending they were Barry's. I mean, not the trial though. That was 100% Barry. Snap that neck. Not salty at all. Number 2, Spider-Man. Oh, Spider-Man. He just has the worst luck. And some of the best villains. Well, really just supporting cast. His villains are second to none, managing to be both menacing and intriguing despite not sounding like they should be. Villains like the Rhino and Electro or Dr. Octopus or Mysterio, who may sound silly on paper but have provided some entertaining storylines. And over the years, Spider-Man's villains list has only grown, adding the likes of Venom, Kraven the Hunter, clones, so many clones, classics again like the Green Goblin. Spider-Man's villains tend to follow a theme, focusing largely but not exclusively on science gone wrong, turning yourself into a lizard or horrible goblin creature. Still, Spidey isn't just known for his villains, and people don't often say they'd rather read about them than him. The same cannot be said for our number 1. I think you know who it is. You were waiting. Obvious, yet deserved. In our number 1 spot, we have Batman. Batman is some of the most iconic villains out there, and has since his inception. The Joker, Catwoman, the Scarecrow, Hugo Strange, Two-Face, Poison Ivy, even further down the list to the likes of the Riddler and beyond. And more have still been being added, who have come to become phenomenons in their own right, such as Bane or Harley Quinn, the Court of Owls even. On top of this, Batman's villains tend to be unique from one another. They have different motivations, and he has a complex relationship with all of them. They have grown and changed over time, look at Mr. Freeze, and most can stand on their own and have had minis or solo outings. As mentioned, there are some who say that they would rather read about these characters than the Dark Knight himself. Are you one of them?